Okay, all right. We're official. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm Eddie Price, the chair of the Community Advisory Committee. This is the beginning of our regular meeting on Friday, May 14th, 2021. Welcome, everyone. So Sebastian, roll call, please.
Yeah. Let's see here. Carolyn Schofield.
Present.
Gary Johns.
Present.
David Harris.
Aquí.
Très bien. No, I know that was Spanish. Tom Summers.
Here.
Matthew Vasilakis.
Here.
Secretary Webb.
Here.
Vice Chair Hammond.
Here.
And Chair Price.
Here, I think.
We have a quorum.
Good. Are there any public comments from the public?
I see a raised hand from Bernadette. So I'll go ahead and unmute you, Bernadette, and you have 3 minutes for non-agenda public comment. Let's see here.
Good
Go
afternoon.
ahead.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Great. Hi, my name is Bernadette Bekowitz. I am the most recent addition to San Diego Gas and Electric's RPA team, Regional Public Affairs. I just wanted to reach out. I've attended, I believe, the last 2 Community Advisory Committee meetings that you all have put on, very informative. And I just, I think it was Mr. Summers last time who mentioned that we'll have to work collaboratively moving forward. And I just wanted to offer myself as an olive branch to you all to get into those hard discussions. I know as we are getting vaccinated and seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, I also wanted to offer some possible tours at our mission control facility or our weather center, if the board is all interested in that. Also, I know you are all touching on NEM 3.0 discussions today with the proceedings at the CPUC. I did submit some comments there, and I do have a job walk, but I do hope to hear your feedback and listen to y'all as you navigate that.
Thank you. Any more comments, Sebastian?
No.
Any items to be withdrawn or reordered on the agenda? I guess not. So I guess I'll pass it over to you for item number 5, Sebastian.
Great. Thank you, Eddie. I'll go ahead and have Bill kick off this item since he's been working very closely with Lisa. So Bill, could you please go ahead?
Okay, thank you. Well, we're wanting to take this opportunity today to sort of kick off with you all, and we did it yesterday with the staff, sort of the beginning of our strategic planning process. We've been talking for a while now about the need, once we got to a point we could take a deep breath after we started up, that we should do a strategic planning process as a new entity, new people. We want to get input from lots of folks in terms of what they want to see us do, what they want to see us become, and we needed to have a real a process to do that. And it's going to involve the board. It's going to involve all the staff at SDCP, and it's going to involve you all of you all, so that we get lots of points of view. It will culminate in a strategic planning session. The date keeps bumping around because it's hard to get all the number of people, particularly the board. It's important all the board be at the strategic planning session, and they're all so busy that we're having some difficulty. We were looking in June, and now we may be actually pushing it out to July to get everyone together, but we do intend to have the process, and we do intend to accommodate whatever we need to do to make sure we get the participation that we need. And it's important for what we've identified as the three main groups of SDCP, and that's the board, the staff, and you all need to discuss your views, how things should operate, how you want to interact, just all the things you would do in the strategic planning process. And then part two of that is going to be a smaller effort where once we have our vision from the board, then we will be doing a staff effort to learn about relationships and learn how to, do teamwork. We're all new. I mean, it's actually funny when we talk to current employees and we say, we want you to do a survey to tell us what you think. And they go, well, I've only been here for 2 weeks, or I've been here for a month. And, they're going to say, what do I know? Well, they do know. They come with certain expectations. And so we want to involve everyone. So it'll be, I think, a landmark. Hopefully it will become a regular event, if not annually, at least on a fairly frequent basis, so that we can course correct as we go along. So I don't know whether Lisa would be interested, or whether we have time for each of you to introduce yourselves to her. I'll leave that up to Eddie and Sebastian and Lisa, but this is Lisa Gordon. She's local. She's from the what you say, fourth generation, I think she's
fourth generation native San Diegan, and very proud of it.
So she knows where all the skeletons are and all that kind of stuff. So we're very glad to have her on board, and we're sorry that it happened so quickly on the front end, but we were looking at the back end and then working backwards from there. All we had to do, and the next thing you knew, it was upon us. And so one of the reasons was we wanted to be able to come to you all in a regular meeting of you all and kick it off with you. And if we don't do it today, we'd have to wait another month. So that's part of the urgency that we had. So with that, I'll turn it over to Lisa and let her tell you what's in store. Okay.
Thank you so much, Bill, and thank you for the introduction. It is really my pleasure to be with you today, and I'm just honored and excited to be your facilitator for this very important strategic planning process that SDCP is about to embark on. If you could go to my next slide, just a little introduction about myself. And Bill already stole my thunder, but it was actually about, I always love to introduce myself as a very proud fourth generation native San Diegan. My family, my heritage really means a lot to me. And this region, this city, this county really mean a lot to me. I really care about our people, our culture, our way of life, our quality of life, our environment, our climate. And so what you are doing and your involvement is so important to our region. So I'm just, again, excited to be your facilitator for this this moment of time in San Diego Community Power's brief history, if you will. So I am a facilitator, I'm a trainer, I'm a consultant. I do a variety of teaching on a variety of topics and facilitating on a variety of topics. I do this all on behalf of boards of directors and corporate government entities, as well as nonprofits and colleges and universities. Typically, I do meeting facilitation, board and staff retreats, training workshops, and I also do executive coaching. Next slide, please, Sebastian. The strategic planning process. I have to just say that, gosh, everyone probably has a different idea on what a strategic planning process is, should be, could be. I mean, there are just so many different elements of it. And so what is so intriguing to me is to be with you, SDCP, in this moment of time and thinking about the core elements of your strategic plan and your strategic planning process. That's what I'm going to be mainly focused on helping you with. Next slide, please, Sebastian. So to kick off and initiate this process, we are doing a survey. And this is where we really need every single member of your committee to respond. to this survey. This is very important for that we get your input, your feedback, your ideas, how you want to express yourself about San Diego Community Power, who it is now, who you want, how you want it to evolve, and what it is the vision of the organization, etc. After the surveys, that'll be followed by interviews with the board of directors and the executive team. So everyone will have an opportunity to, again, provide their input and feedback into the initial process, as well as that this will help us set up our planning for those 2 strategic planning sessions, which will be board meetings. So that first strategic planning session, we are going to be focused on mission and vision development, and also thinking about the key focus areas, and then what are the priorities in those key focus areas, and then setting up goals that align with your mission, right, and your priorities. The second session, as Bill was sharing, is more of an organizational culture and core values discussion for San Diego Community Power. And then talking about how you're communicating, what kind of culture do you want to create, communicating from the board, the CAC, the staff, your customers, and your stakeholders. And so we will also be doing a team building workshop as part of that. Next slide. The survey is just launched yesterday, and so I'm getting to you today as soon as I could to ask you for your prompt attention and response to an email that you're going to be receiving from me this afternoon. And so I didn't want to just send an email and then you're like, who's this Lisa person, right? I wanted to make sure that I introduced myself, that you had some foundational information about what it is, the process, and kind of thinking about our timelines and our deadlines, etc. So the survey launched yesterday. It is an open-ended, nice open-ended 14-question survey where you'll be able to express yourselves accordingly. The deadline is to respond on the survey is May 19th. So you have about 5 days to get to it, 5 o'clock. And it takes about 15 minutes, but also I would say minimum, 15 minutes minimum, but I would allow about 30 minutes for you to really take the time and think through and process from your perspective. These questions, they are not easy questions. They're challenging. And in some cases, you're just going to have to really dig deep. Sometimes you're going to be like, I'm not really sure. I know. So, partial responses are welcome. All responses are welcome for the survey. And with that, I will now open it up to any questions or comments.
Well, let's see.
Well, if Charles is thinking of his question, maybe I can ask mine. The event that Bill referred to, whose date is slipping, there was an associated email that referred to it as a retreat. And I'm wondering if it's going to be a physical gathering now that we're coming out of restrictions about coming together, or if it's going to be a virtual meeting like all our meetings have been for the last year.
Bill, did you want to respond on that? Or I can? Oh, your microphone's not on, Bill.
I didn't have. I'd say go ahead. You've been involved in that as much as I have. So
okay, so the plan A was actually to have this in person. So be a board meeting called for a live and in-person experience. And then we were always had the plan B in case we had needed to have this as a virtual experience. I hope that answers your question. And again, we're just now that we're in a different stage of trying to find a different date. It's going to depend on, availability of facilities based upon that date? And then Bill, did you want to add anything else?
Well, other than we've already been looking at locations where we can have it, we don't, I prefer not to call it a retreat. I think it's a work session. I think that sounds better as a public entity if we
Yeah,
don't.
it's a session. It's called a session.
Yeah,
Strategic
retreat,
planning session.
Retreat is kind of a little different connotation, but we've been looking among our members and some of their facilities and whatnot to host us. To some extent, the delay downstream, pushing it downstream, probably helps us in that regard. Every day that goes by, things get more open, we hope. And so we're not altogether disappointed in that because we think we have a much better shot now. But we do have a plan B for backup if we can't do that. So I hope that answers the question.
And so all of you will be, whenever that date is determined and finalized, as well as the location, all of you will be invited to attend.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for that. And it was actually an important question to me because now the travel restrictions are lifting. My wife and I are planning on doing a lot of catch-up traveling to go see grandkids. So it'll be good to know the date. Thank you.
That was my question too. When Gary called me Charles, I had to rename myself. But anyway,
okay.
the question was in regards to where and when, and you've touched on that. I want to thank you for your presentation, Lisa.
Thank you so much, Tom, not Charles.
Correct.
Because I think I called you Charles too.
Yeah, both
Yeah.
work.
Both
Yeah,
work.
Charles didn't sound right to me, but I was looking at my screen. I said, well, must have gone past me here.
You guys are some of my best friends that I've never met.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, one last thing. I want to reiterate our mayor's invitation to use our facility right on the beach down here in Imperial Beach. It's a great meeting room, and the invitation stands.
Thank you. It is on the list.
Absolutely. I heard about it. I heard it's beautiful. All right. Well, then I will conclude and thank everyone. The last slide was just my slide of kind of thinking about how excited again I am to be in this process with you as we kind of now here we are in May 2021 and looking into the future and the vision for the organization. I'm happy to be a part of it, and please be on the lookout for my email, which will be coming to you later this afternoon.
Well, thank you.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Very much. I heard, but I don't see it on this agenda, and I probably should have said it earlier, that we now have a CFO.
Yeah, that's correct, Chair Price. Bill, please go ahead.
Actually, his name is Eric Washington. He started, I think, first part of the week. This is actually his first week. He's local. He's worked in the banking sector in the San Diego area for the last 10 or 12 years, I know. So we're glad to have him on board as another addition. And so we keep incrementally adding as we go along, new hires. So we're interviewing for a couple of positions in the power supply group. Next week, we've actually had preliminary interviews already. So we'll be adding some folks there, and we have a regular list of all the additions that are going to be made. But yeah, we'll bring him to one of your meetings and let you interact with him and meet him.
Okay, thank you. Now we have a presentation from San Diego Workforce Partnership, I believe.
Yes, if I may, Chair Price, if you want to entertain any public comments on this item, I do see a hand raised.
Please.
Okay, Erica, you have 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you for that. I think I raised my hand at the wrong time. It really was a question for the strategic planning process, and that would simply be, how do members of the public have the opportunity to comment to the development of priorities and goals?
If you attend, is my microphone still on?
Yes.
Yes, so I would encourage you to attend this. This will be a board meeting and a public meeting, so will have the opportunity for public comment during those sessions.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Erica. All right, moving on to the next item. Receive informational presentation from San Diego Workforce Partnership. And I know Chair Price, this item was initiated by you, so I'll pass it over to you for introduction.
Okay, well, I can't say any more. Thank you. I can't say any more than what you said. So maybe we'll just open up to the presenter from the San Diego Workforce Partnership and let them tell us who they are and what their intentions with us may be.
All right, go ahead, Melanie.
Thanks so much for having me here today, everyone. I am Melanie Woods. I am the head of Energy Construction and Utilities Talent Initiatives at the San Diego Workforce Partnership. I won't keep you long today. I understand you have a very dense agenda, but my goal for today is that you come away with an understanding of our programs so that you can think of us in the future for your hiring needs and the hiring needs of your partners. Yeah, and additionally, I'd love your feedback on potential ways to recruit within our sustainable network for participants in these programs. So next slide. So just a little background on the Workforce Partnership. I'm sure many of you are familiar, but we're the workforce agency for the region. So we receive the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act dollars, and we are bringing key partners together for the benefit of job seekers and connecting job seekers with the training and resources to secure quality jobs. I'd like to see us be the go-to agency for regional partnership and collaboration for a sustainable workforce. Next slide. So we know this is an incredibly important time for workforce development as we recover, our region recovers from the pandemic. So we have a few key goals that we're trying to achieve. We want to strengthen the green infrastructure in our region. We want to diversify and extend the talent pipeline of workers who are going to be a part of this field, and provide San Diego residents with quality jobs and career pathways for a better future. So next slide. So a little bit about our programs. I'm overseeing two key programs that I think blend the closest to what you at Community Power will need. So first is our High Road Construction Careers Program. This is an apprenticeship readiness program. This program created a collaborative, and we're committed to breaking the barriers to employment in construction careers. It brings us together all stakeholders to leverage our resources and build a unified and streamlined pipeline into pre-apprenticeship programs. So you can see some of our partners there. Next slide. So a little more about the course. The training is led by the College of Continuing Ed, and participants have a case manager and are connected with the supportive services they need to be successful in the program. This is a 12-week multi-craft core curriculum. The first 2 weeks are in the classroom only, and then they spend 10 weeks in really a blended coursework and actual work site on the job training, during which time they're receiving many of their necessary certifications. And they receive internship hours on actual construction work site. So that is the High Roads Construction Careers. So we also have Construction Career Jumpstart. This program aims to diversify the entry-level pipeline for careers in our priority sectors. So this is kind of the abbreviated version of the program. Workers in this pathway can become welders, linewomen, electrician, laborers, and other skilled trades. And we're really seeking to serve populations who are underrepresented in the construction and energy industries currently. Next slide. So, so we're bringing these underrepresented populations into a 140-hour, basically month-long training where they'll receive safety training, applied mathematics, and also receive on-the-job training that will get them ready for jobs in this sector. So a few of our employer partners right now are Tesla, SDG&E, and Agoras. And as soon as our participants are done, we're actually placing them in jobs with these companies. So it's really exciting because it's about a 2-month turnaround before these individuals are placed in quality jobs and on career pathways. Next slide. That's just a little bit more about the program. Again, they receive a stipend for the program, and they're also receiving supportive services and job readiness throughout the training. Next slide. So the future of this, we really want to focus on our community outreach and meet people where they are. So we're looking to our community leaders like yourselves to help us promote these programs and extend our sphere of influence. We also want to partner with additional training providers so that we can reduce the travel barrier for people to enter these programs. And next, and the part that I think is most relevant to Community Power, is we'd like to expand our employment opportunities. So we really want these to land people in green jobs in our sustainable workforce. We know that as we ramp up and Community Power ramps up, there are going to be an enormous amount of jobs in the green job space. So we want to be a part of that, and we want to proactively be providing a workforce that meets these needs. Next slide. So that's my contact information. I'd love your thoughts and feedback and hope that we can work together in the future.
Thank you. Thank you very much. As you can see, this is why I wanted, I hope that she would present to us, because it presents a interesting futuristic opportunity for us to go above and beyond what's traditionally been done in the CCA world and actually create something that's beneficial to communities of concern and everybody else. So thank you, Melanie. I really appreciate this. And hopefully, if Bill's still on, will invite you to a board meeting to give a presentation.
Excellent.
Here, and I'll be happy to contact Melanie and see what we can do.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Melanie. Any questions for Melanie?
Yes, Tom here.
Hey, Tom.
Thank you, Melanie. I was wondering if you could just touch briefly on, by the way, I just signed up for your newsletter. If you could touch briefly how you get your funding, and also, do you have support or help from from organized labor? Thanks.
So we receive our funding from a lot of different sources. So a typical workforce agency gets all their funding from the federal government, and we use federal funding to support the majority of our programs. The Workforce Partnership is a little more innovative than that. We've been chasing a lot of philanthropic dollars, and during this time and pandemic recovery, there's actually a lot of state funding that's available to support our programs. Also, Additionally, with our Construction Career Jumpstart, we actually have an employer partner who's willing to pay to subsidize these programs because they know they're going to be getting quality candidates out of the pipeline. So the answer to the funding question is really, we get our funding from members. With the organized labor question, our HRCC program, labor is one of our stakeholder participants on our regional collaborative. So they have an active role, and because we're really working to get these participants into their programs, it's not technically a pre-apprenticeship program, but it's an apprenticeship readiness program. So we have their buy-in, and they understand that we have candidates who are going to be ready for their apprenticeship cohorts.
Thank
Any other questions?
Hey, Chair Price, I'm not sure if you can see the screen in front of you, but I see Matt and David with their hands.
Okay, yeah, I can't see that people's hands up, so thank you. Matt, question, concern, comment?
Oh, just a comment. Thank you, Melanie. Really appreciate the presentation and the time and the work that you're doing. I think paramount for me, representing San Diego on this committee is ensuring that we're really making a concerted effort to build a pipeline of jobs for folks that are in communities of concern, particularly for as you put it on your own presentation, women, veteran, and BIPOC communities. And so looking forward to partnering and finding ways to doing that. I think one central thing that we've just had lots of conversations with folks in this space about is the need to bring those resources into communities like Southeast San Diego and south of the 8 spaces. So again, just really looking forward to partnering and having more conversations and finding ways to do that because it's been somewhat frustrating in other areas. But I really like the concerted effort that you put forward.
Great.
Somebody else had a question for Melanie?
Yes, I just wanted to follow up on Matt's question about the communities of concern. And does the Workforce Partnership track the number of pre-apprentices that actually then enter into apprenticeship programs, especially related to clean energy jobs?
Yes, and we actually have SANDAG signed on as a partner to really engage in some more long-term tracking of our participants for our High Road Construction Careers program. So we want to see that they have a quality job, and over time they're progressing within their career pathway.
Okay, thank you. Any more hands raised, Sebastian?
No, Chair, and there's no one in the public with their hands raised either.
Okay, well, once again, thank you, Melanie. Really appreciate your presentation. I look forward to a long, prosperous relationship with Workforce Partnership and San Diego Community Power.
Excellent. Thanks so much for having me here today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie.
Bye. Let me find my agenda. Uh-oh, this is about to get heated. Discuss and review staff recommendations to the board on net surplus compensation for net energy metering customers. Do we have any information, and who's going to present this, Sebastian?
Yeah, Chair Price. For this presentation, it'll be one of our fellow STAR team members, Nelson Lamelli. If you recall, he presented himself at the last board meeting. He has a lot of experience. He comes from Sonoma Clean Power. I won't steal your thunder, Nelson, but I'll go ahead and stop sharing so you can share those slides.
Sebastian, if you want, you can continue sharing those slides. It's not a big deal.
Okay. Let me reshare then. Go ahead.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
So hello, everyone. Good afternoon. As Sebastian said, my name is Nelson Lomeli. I am a program manager. And in my previous life, I was also a program manager for Sonoma Clean Power. Before you is, as Sebastian said, is to discuss and review the staff recommendation to the board on net surplus compensation and some other net energy metering related topics. And so Sebastian, if you want to go to the next slide. I want to set the groundwork in terms of what we're going to talk about because this is a pretty lengthy presentation and a big topic as the chair said. Where I want to start is giving you all some background information in terms of how many existing NEM customers San Diego Community Power will serve, since we are postponing enrollment of those until next year. How net energy metering works from a billing perspective, from our perspective and from a customer's perspective, and also how the true-up process and billing works. So laying the foundational groundwork for that, then we can really get into the discussion around discussing and reviewing like what a net surplus compensation rate means, establish what we're recommending to the board on establishing a net surplus compensation cap, and some changes to the net energy metering policy that the board adopted to standardize all customers on a monthly true-up basis. And so, Sebastian, if you want to go to the next slide, we'll start again, as I said, with some background. I pulled these numbers together for you all to see in terms of what we're talking about here in the number of NEM customers that we are going to be serving. And again, I don't like to use acronyms that much, but net energy metering is quite a mouthful, so I'm just going to refer to them as NEM. And so as of February 2021, which is when I had the last data for our reports, we have close to 90,000 eligible NEM accounts. Out of those 90,000, about 8,200 are low-income customers that are enrolled in the California Alternative Rates for Energy, or the federal program equivalent. I think it's like, I forget what the acronym stands for, but the F is for federal. Of the 90,000 accounts, 1,800 or a little over 1,800 accounts are considered commercial, 46 accounts are considered industrial, and the vast majority here, really what we're talking about is 87,000 of them, close to 88,000 of them are considered residential. And so on the side, you'll see a breakdown of what those accounts are spread over the 5 cities that we are going to be serving. And the vast majority, of course, are in the city of San Diego, since they're a pretty large city. And the chart below that is just what I just read out loud in a pie form. Next slide, Sebastian, please. So I want to talk about and note that net energy metering is a pretty complicated subject. It is a very contentious subject right now. But when we talk about some of the things that we can discuss and review, I want to note that we are not affecting the transmission or distribution charges whatsoever. We're not touching the minimum bill payments or any of the proposals in terms of creative access charges or any other charges that the utility can, may, and potentially will charge customers. So what we're trying to focus with this presentation really is on those 3 subjects: on net surplus compensation, the compensation cap, and the monthly true-up. The issues around net energy metering and where the program will evolve to in the energy metering 3.0 are going to be in the next agenda item that Sebastian and my colleague Laura will talk about. And so that will be through both the CPC and the legislation. Next slide, Sebastian. So let's get into the fun of net energy metering and how it actually works. So I want to start with like an example, and I use myself as I have incorporated myself, and I am now a business owner. And so I install a solar energy system, and all solar energy systems have to be interconnected if they're going to be serving the grid. And so I install an energy solar system and it interconnect with SDG&E. If you want to click next, Sebastian. So that any energy that the system produces first is going to be used by the building. So right now we're just talking purely from the solar system to the building. Click again, Sebastian. So if, for example, I turn off some lights or turn off my air conditioner or something, if I consume less electricity than what the system is producing, that extra electricity produced is then sent to the grid. When I, as a customer, consume more electricity than what the system produces, then that extra electricity that I'm consuming, again, is drawn from the grid. And so when we talk about net energy metering, we talk about it on a monthly basis. So all of this is happening, in real time, but when we talk about how the program works, it's all on a monthly basis. So on a monthly basis, the utility determines how much electricity was sent to the grid and how much electricity was consumed, and they add that all up. So again, on a monthly basis, if the amount of electricity sent to the grid is more than the amount of electricity consumed from the grid, this is what's called net generation. So in that case, me as a customer, I am a net generator. So as an example, let's say I consumed 900 kilowatt hours, but I generated 1,000. And I want to note that all generation from a billing perspective is considered negative usage, as you can see there. So I have net generated 100 kilowatt hours. And so on a monthly basis, this net generation is credited or is paid for as, or compensated, some words used there, but I like to use credited. It's based on the customer's rate schedule and the time of use period. So whether they're on peak or off peak. So as an example, let's say I'm a customer and I'm on a commercial customer and I am on the rate schedule 2UAS. So you can see here that the peak is from 4 to 9. The summer rate is around 19 cents. I rounded the numbers. And let's say I am a net generator during that peak of 50 kilowatt hours. So in that case, I am credited $9.63 for the peak. Similar thing happens on off peak, but you'll see that the rate is much lower. So I get credited less. So for that month, as a whole, I am credited $14.11. So let's talk about it on the flip side, right? Like, let's say I am now consuming more electricity than what my system is generating. In this case, then I am a net consumer, or I have net consumption. So again, using the same example, I consumed 1,000 kilowatt hours and I only generated 900. I have now net consumed from the utility 100 kilowatt hours. And similarly, with the way that net generation is credited, net consumption is charged based on the customer's rate schedule and the time of use period. So the next slide just kind of shows that again, right? So instead of now being credited, I am now charged $14 for that month. So let's get into how all of this adds up into the grand scheme of things in terms of the true-up process and the billing process. So net energy metering, what happens is this net consumption and net generation by the time of use periods, right? Again, they're tracked for 12 months from the date that the customer installed their solar system. And this is referred to as the relevant period. The associated generation credits and the consumption charges, they're all calculated like we talked about, but they're banked for 12 months. So the customer doesn't receive a bill for the generation charges, or excuse me, for the consumption charges or the generation credits. Are kind of banked on the utility side. At the end of those 12 months, at the end of the relevant period, the utility conducts what's called a true-up. And essentially what a true-up means is they add up all of those credits, all of those charges, and all of the monthly minimum bill payments that the customer has made. So we add all of those up. And if the customer has more generation credits, essentially has more negative numbers than the charges for the entire year, the customer owes nothing to the utility. They've already paid their fee, what they owed. However, as we'll get into it later, if a customer has more charges than generation credits, the customer is then sent a bill for the difference, and they are required to pay for that. So that is what we call a true up. And that again happens once a year. So this is an example of what I'm talking about here. So again, the monthly charges, you can see the negative numbers, and then you see the monthly, the monthly net credits, the negative numbers, and then the monthly charges are the positive numbers. And so essentially what the utility does is they add all of those up, and then they get to a final number, and that is the true up, right? That's negative $188. But then when you look at the net usage, right, now we go back into talking about kilowatt hours. The customer actually consumed electricity from the utility in this year, even though they have a negative balance. And really that's due to the high prices in the summer and in the peaks when they are generating. So click again, Sebastian. So now let's look at an example of a customer that is a net generator. So again, add up all of the negative charges and the positive charges, or credits and charges, and you get to a final true up amount. But in this case, now the customer is a net generator annually, right? So now we look at, when we sum all the net usage, we get to a negative 450 kilowatt hours. And that's how much electricity the customer exported to the grid on an annual basis. So when we talk about the next phase about net surplus compensation, we are really only going to be talking about that final number at the end of the year, that 450. So if we go to the next slide, now we get into the fun of it, right? So the net surplus compensation is only paid for the annual net generation. Again, that negative 450 in our example. And it is paid to compensate those that have net exported in the year. The net surplus compensation rate for the utilities is set at the wholesale cost of electricity, and it varies by month. There's a formula that the CPUC has established of how that net surplus compensation can be determined. I want to be very clear here that the net surplus compensation is not used to calculate the monthly generation credits, right? That, again, is determined based on the customer's rate schedule. So if they're on EVTOU or DRTOU, that's how that monthly compensation is going to be determined. So when we talk about, again, going to our example about net surplus compensation and how much we should pay for that, we are talking about that final number, the 450. So if you go to the next slide, Sebastian, when we talk about net surplus compensation and the net surplus compensation rate, we take that final annual net generation and we multiply it by the net surplus compensation rate for that month. And again, this is all based on the customer's true up date. So in this case, if the customer, this hypothetical customer, me, as Nelson Incorporated, if I net generated 450 kilowatt hours, at the end of the year, I would get compensated $13.81. So it's the 450 times the 3 cents. So what we are taking to the board as what the board is going to be considering is establishing a net surplus compensation rate for San Diego Community Power. And what our staff recommendation to the board is to set the net surplus compensation to match SDG&E's monthly net surplus compensation. But because we want to differentiate ourselves, we want to add a 3/4 cent adder as an incentive for customers to generate 100% renewable local electricity. And if that number looks familiar, it is because it is our Power 100 adder. So what our staff recommendation is, let's use the net surplus compensations if it's already a wholesale rate, but let's add a little bit more for thanking customers for generating 100% local renewable electricity. And I don't know if you click, Sebastian, if there's anything more. Yes. So we did take a look around what other CCAs have been doing in terms of the compensation landscape, and most of them, except for 3, use this net surplus compensation method. The other 3 that you see on the side, they use a retail credit balance, where they just look at that final number of 180 in our case that we looked at, 188. So again, Sebastian, if you go to the next slide, I think we'll stop here to review and discuss what our staff recommendation is. But when we did some preliminary estimation of what this would look like for our customers, we would potentially see a financial payment to customers of $2.8 million per year to net generators. And this is a very conservative estimate where we took the maximum rate that SDG&E has had over the course of the last 3 years, and then we added again that adder to it. And this financial payment is going to vary on depending on a lot of number of different factors, including how big the system size is, the weather. So if we get hopefully in the next year we get some rain and we get a lot of rainy weather, that will again reduce the amount of generation. Depends on customer behavior, like if they turn their air conditioning off or more, or turn it back on, that all has a big impact on their usage. And if they electrify, so if they add an electric vehicle or some other kind of electrification technology, that all impacts how much net generation will happen. So I'll stop talking for now so we can discuss this piece before we move on to the next part.
Are there any questions for this young man from the committee or from the public?
Yeah, Eddie.
Go ahead, Tom.
Sorry to be the only one to ask everybody everything, but I was wondering if we had a comparison between our service area and other service areas to the north in regards to the percentages of net generators here versus elsewhere.
That's a really good question. And we don't have that comparison in terms of net generators. What we have heard from other CCAs when we've been on calls talking about net energy metering has been that they all are around roughly about 20 to 30% of their customer base is like a solar customer or a net energy metering customer. I don't know what percentage of those are net generators, but in our case here in San Diego Community Power, our consultants estimated that about 30% of all net energy metering customers that we are going to be serving are net generators.
Yeah, thanks for that. I consider myself one of them, and I will continue to be a net generator in spite of any efforts by the incumbent utility to the negative effect of that. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Any other questions? Any hands raised, Sebastian?
Mine's raised, Eddie.
Okay.
Chair Price. What is CEA's current compensation? I believe when Solana Energy Alliance started, the wholesale rate that they credited after the annual true up was higher than SDG&E's. I think it was around 6 or 8 cents. I know it differed by rate. But do you know what CEA currently is offering?
Sebastian, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that their net surplus compensation rate is set at a fixed flat rate of 6 cents.
And is there a reason, probably financial, but what was the thought of having it equivalent to SDG&E versus having it be more beneficial for solar customers?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think the reason was that if the net surplus compensation is already being paid at the wholesale rate, and that's already being determined by the utility and the market as a whole, to compensate it at that rate, to just fix it at that rate, and then just have an additional adder for customers to be ours, for being our customers.
Is this different than the wholesale rate?
So slightly. So the net surplus compensation rate, SDG&E is the wholesale rate. It's the for the month, the wholesale rate for the month.
So with net metering right now, you have at the end of your bill, if you have excess credits, we just generally speaking, you get paid wholesale rate. How is that different than net surplus compensation?
Yeah, that's a good point. So on a monthly basis, when a customer has net generation on a monthly basis, they are actually paid on their rate schedule. So again, if they're on TOUA, they get that 19 cents a kilowatt hour. They get paid or compensated or credited is the way I like to look at it, at that amount. This only comes into effect on a yearly basis. So at the end, once all of those bills have been estimated and trued up, it's only if the amount of electricity exported to the year, to the grid in the year, if it's negative, then that's when this formula would kick in.
So that's the same as wholesale. You don't get wholesale compensation during the regular NEM period. It's only if you have excess credit on the true up.
Yes, correct. Yeah. So you right now, as the way that the NEM program is structured, you don't get the wholesale rate on a monthly basis. It's only when you get trued up and you have a negative net usage, or if you have our net generator for the year.
So my previous question, you started talking about retail credit, which I understand and is separate, but I'm still unclear how net surplus compensation differs from wholesale credit. You have your annual true up, you have excess solar credit. I've been in the industry 10 years. That's usually referred to as the wholesale credit. Is the net surplus compensation, which is that it sounds like it's that same wholesale credit. If you have excess credits at your true up, how does that differ from the wholesale credit, or is it just the same thing with a different name?
So I'm a little confused. So for the monthly credit, for a monthly bill, right? They are paid at the retail rate. They're credited at the retail rate, I should say. Once all of those retail credits are added up, then you get a final true up amount. And in our example, we used, I think one of them showed it was like negative $188, right? That is just the monthly rate. Once you get to the true up period, then you flip over into only using the net energy exported. And so that's when you get to that. I think our example, we saw negative 450, and that negative 450 would then get paid at this net surplus compensation rate.
Okay, that's the same as wholesale. I'm going to ask something different to see if it helps clarify, if that's okay. With net surplus compensation, each month, there is a net on your bill. If there is excess solar production on your monthly bill, are you rolling that over at whatever rate you received it? Because that's going into this, that was my understanding, was the difference is you are losing, you get stuck with monthly wholesale credit, which would lower your annual true up, versus the current net metering arrangement where it's the truly annual, and then your excess is wholesale credit. But how you're describing it, it sounds identical, or how I'm understanding what you're describing. But I'm wondering if that's a differentiator, because I'm not hearing a difference from what you're saying.
Yeah, so that's a really good point. And I think what you're describing is what the utilities are proposing for NEM 3.0. And I really I would like to leave that for the next discussion that Sebastian's going to lead. But Sebastian, if you want to go back a couple of slides to one of the examples that we showed. So yeah, we can stop here. So let's, so for like in your question you had asked in terms of like, what if you're a net generator for that month, right? Let's take the month of June, you're a net generator of 800 kilowatt hours, right? All of that just gets tracked over the course of the year. We are not going to be paying the net surplus compensation rate that we're discussing here on a monthly basis. That is only done annually at the true up date. So once all of those numbers are added up and you get to that final net total. So to help answer the question is that net surplus compensation is not, we're not paying that on a monthly basis. All of the numbers in terms of net usage and the monthly charges, those are all kind of tracked and banked over the course of the year as they are, and then that true up happens.
Okay, that's how I understood it when you described. I still am not hearing a difference between what typically is described as excess wholesale credit today versus this, but maybe I can follow up with someone afterwards to get that clear.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time on this and explanations. And Eddie, I do see that Dennis has a hand raised.
Hey, Dennis.
Who's Dennis?
Hello, this is Dennis. Thank you and I appreciate the briefing. I just had one quick question on understand your explanation on your scenario 2, where you're a net generator of electricity. But if you go to scenario 1, where the monthly retail charges add up to a negative, but you are actually a user of energy, how would that net out at the end of the year? Would you end up having to pay, or is that a zero bill?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And what ends up happening in that situation is the utility calls it a wash and zeroes everything out. So they zero everything out at the end of in terms of the generation and the credit. So you don't get that 188 as a bill credit or anything like that. It just becomes a zero balance again, and you start the year over.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Now that I found a way to see hands raised, and I don't see any more, and please correct me if I'm wrong. I guess you can continue, young man.
Sounds good. Thank you. So the next thing that I want to discuss now that we have this net surplus compensation, one to discuss that, and a thing that we are taking to the board, an item, which is to establish a cap or a limit to the amount of net surplus compensation from us. And so what we are recommending to the board as staff is to limit the net surplus compensation at a maximum of $2,500 per account per year. And the cap is set to minimize financial impacts to SDCP and by extension our customers. And really it's there to protect us in the unlikely event that the wholesale market prices and therefore the net surplus compensation rate, they are ever go volatile and spike. And I wanted to note that the 10-year average, when we look at the data that's been presented, is about 3.5 cents. The highest that's ever gone has been 5 cents, which is back in November of 2014. And when we look at when we made this recommendation, we looked at like what impact would this have on our customers on net generators. And the vast majority, if not, I don't want to say all of them, but like 99% of them will never approach this cap. And I say that because on average, our net generators are exporting 1,773 kilowatt hours per year. And what that equates to, if we set the net surplus compensation at the net surplus compensation for SDG&E plus our adder, they would receive a compensation equivalent to about $100 for that year. So really the net surplus compensation cap here is to protect us in case anything drastic were to happen. and I can think of a certain state that had their wholesale prices go a little crazy. So that's what the discussion item is before you.
Okay, is that the end of your presentation?
There's one more item, but I don't know if Chair, if you want to take some time to talk about this first before I talk about the next one, or however you want to do it, Chair.
What's the next? Is that what's up here now, or?
There's another one that has to deal with the monthly billing process. So this one is more of a compensation cap.
Yeah, let's talk about that monthly billing thing also.
Well, I have my hand raised for compensation cap.
Go ahead, Gary.
So, I guess I don't quite understand. So I'm thinking of the example in Texas where, of course, people had incredible bills based on just like a week of outrageous wholesale prices. And so if we totally, somebody's got to fit, somebody's got to pay the bill for that. And so does SDCP get stuck with huge cash outflow while protecting customers with a cap like this?
That's a really good point. And so what is before you is, if you recall from the last discussion point, we said that the net surplus compensation was going to be essentially the wholesale rate SDG&E's net surplus compensation plus that adder. So what this cap means, and setting that at $2,500, is the maximum we are going to be paying customers for net generation is $2,500. So let's say, taking an example, right, that this customer exported 1,773 kilowatt hours a year, right? But let's say we have this unforeseen event where wholesale rates spike dramatically and they're at like $2 a kilowatt hour, which is, absurd, right? It's just a crazy amount. If that's a net surplus compensation when a customer trues up, at that point, we wouldn't be paying them the 1,773 times $2. We would, but then if the total amount is larger than the 2,500, we would only pay them out at 2,500, no more than that. So there wouldn't be really a financial impact in terms of the bills in the scenario you're describing to us.
Okay.
I'd like to piggyback question because the way I interpreted Gary's question was, okay, we're getting a cap, we're putting a cap on compensation. Will we be putting a cap on obligation?
Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
So yeah, to protect us from these sharks that drove the prices up in Texas and Enron and whatnot. It's one thing to have a cap on the compensation to the net generator. Is there going to be a cap on the obligation if we're a net consumer?
That is a good point, and I feel like that is a different discussion to be had entirely, and I think that's more something that has to do with rates and the way we are billing customers, and not necessarily with the compensation cap, because that's more of a wholesale transaction for energy that we are purchasing ourselves, more so than related to net energy metering.
Okay, thanks. Just my contribution to the discussion portion here is that the $2,500 cap seems to be very, very reasonable. I would definitely support that. I don't see how a residential customer could possibly generate that much surplus, but I think it's responsible to establish the cap. So I would be for it.
Okay, thank you. Tara, you had your hand up?
Thanks. I was going to say I would support a cap as well. SDG&E currently limits the size of a solar power system that what you can build. So you can't build a huge system, and nor does it make sense financially to build a really large system because you're getting pennies back. And so solar power system companies don't intentionally oversize systems because it ruins the economics on them. So that's why I've never heard of anyone getting a $2,500 check, but I think a cap makes sense. I am curious. There is a check with SDG&E right now. You can roll over your credits to the next year. Is that an option as well? But if someone decides to take a check, then the check would be written for up to this amount.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point and something that we can definitely explore more and potentially bring back to the board. I would need to check the NEM policy again to see what current language exists in terms of rolling over credits, but we have heard of CCAs allowing the compensation to be rolled into the next year. I believe that the way our current NEM policy is set is that if it's less than $100, they can roll it over. But if it's more than $100, we can send them a check for.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anna, yeah, your hand is up.
Yes, thank you. I too just want to say that I would support the cap at 2,500. It's been a while. It's been 12 years since I was on net metering when I lived in Hawaii. And I don't recall ever, getting anyone getting, I think it's a reasonable amount. The other question I had is, do we know how many current solar customers that we would be taking on in the beginning? I know it might grow. Is that an appropriate question?
Yeah, so we have the number of NEM customers that we will be serving next year is close to 90,000. Of that, about 30% are net generators.
And that's likely to grow.
Yeah.
Maybe Sebastian, you could roll back to that pie chart.
It's way at the beginning, Tom.
Yeah, I apologize. I take notes because I'm the secretary, and sometimes I'm typing and I miss the.
Yeah, Anna, no worries. The presentation is on the website, so you can take a look at it there.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
David?
Yes, I'm a novice at this NEM. And so thank you for your presentation. It's really informative. I've heard a couple members say that 2,500 sounds reasonable. And that's 25 times what the average customer is going to receive. And I guess I'm not sure what reasonable means in that regard. Why not 10 times what the average customer will receive?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know, Chair, if you want me to answer that, or if you want to allow the other members to speak.
Yes, I'm curious also.
Do you want me to answer that, Chair, or do you want the other members to? Okay.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so we looked at what other community choice programs were offering, and they had set their cap at $5,000. And so we determined that, again, that's a lot, given the fact that most of the compensation and the number of net generation happening is nowhere going to approach that. And so we set it at half that amount at 2,500. Based on what other CCAs had done. And then we looked at some back of the envelope calculations in terms of how much generation would it take to get there. And we determined that a customer would have to be net generating about 48 to 116 megawatt hours a year to approach that cap. And so it's a lot of energy, very unlikely to happen, but we also didn't want to, I think for this would be a discussion point for the committee to think about, but we didn't want to make it seem like we were being too restrictive on net energy metering as well. But if the committee feels differently, I think all of this information we can take back to the board and present that to them.
Yeah, this is the chair. I don't have my hand raised, but I'm the chair, so I can talk. You know, you know, in regards to the last question and the $5,000 that the other limits on the other CCAs are, and that it will be virtually impossible for anybody to reach that limit, but it's good to have that that space that will attract people to go solar, right? And utilize the solar in the hopes that, you know, we can make up to $2,500 a year on this, right? So, you know, I, along with some of the other members of the committee, you know, I'm in support of this cap. There's a whole bunch of hands up now. David Harris, you have another statement, sir? Question?
Yeah, I would just follow up to staff with when this goes to the board to define reasonable in relation to where you're setting this cap.
Okay.
If that's yeah, that's all.
Okay, thank you. Gary?
Yeah, the sidebar conversation here was about what happens on, you know, excess payments if they can roll over. And I had looked at Marin Clean Energy, MCE, earlier, and I'll just throw out this one tidbit from their website about their NIM program here. They say one of their advantages is cash out annually. Cash out payments over $50 will be automatically processed annually. You will receive a check sent to the mailing address tied to your account. So, you know,
Okay.
CCAs roll over the money, or well, they pay off on the excess.
Yeah, and I think that was mentioned earlier also.
If I may, Chair, if I can comment, I pulled up the current NEM policy that was adopted by the board, and it does say that anything equal to or greater than 100 is sent to the customer, and anything less than that is rolled over into the next relevant period.
Right. Okay. Tara?
I was wondering if an analysis had been done to give a greater credit amount, the net surplus compensation amount, say instead of 4.4 or whatever it was, increase that, but lower this annual credit to see if the financials on that, because thinking about equity, if that excess credit helps incentivize a higher amount, incentivize people see it and it looks more attractive to go solar, more people could potentially benefit from that versus people who can pay to build a much, much larger system, much larger than they need. And then they're the ones that would be receiving that compensation. I don't know, just a thought to see if, because I think Solana Energy Alliance did it. And I remember hearing people saying, I'm excited about this program. They talked about their wholesale credit. I'm getting the 6 cents versus SDG&Es, and that was important. So just a random thought if there was any analysis done.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And we can definitely take a look at doing that analysis. We hadn't done it the way you describe it. So we can definitely take that back as an action item to do that analysis and present that.
You had another question or comment?
Yeah, when you mentioned the $5,000 cap that other CCAs have, I was kind of taken aback by that, but I'm wondering, those places, those jurisdictions are perhaps more agricultural maybe than our 5 cities. Because I do know people that are stockpiling panels and continuing to add to their arrays, not necessarily here. So is there perhaps something I'm missing in regards to why it might be necessary to have a bigger cap to attract more buy-in from net producers?
Yeah, I think what ended up happening is that one CCA established theirs at 5,000 when they were cashing out at retail credits. And I think everyone kind of just followed suit with that 5,000. And so I think that's where that landed up. And then the way that the compensation was done was changed to net surplus. And so I think that's where a lot of CCAs ended up just setting it at 5,000 because it had been done before.
I just want to make enough to pay for my natural gas bill.
Maybe we can electrify your natural gas.
We're trying.
Nice way to sneak that in, Nelson.
So Chair, if it's okay, we can move on to the last piece on this item.
Please.
Okay. So the next piece is to standardize the true up billing and the true up and billing method. And so currently what our board adopted NEM program policy states is that residential customers will be trued up and billed annually, and commercial and industrial customers, so what we consider non-residential, are trued up and billed monthly. Next slide. And so I wanted to show you and what the differences are between a yearly true up and a monthly true up. And so if you recall, for a yearly true up, which is the way that it's currently set for residential customers, is the generation credits are calculated and banked for 12 months. Consumption credit charges, are calculated and banked for 12 months as well. And so once a year, the generation credits and those consumption charges, plus any minimum bill payments, they're added up. And if the customer has more generation credits and charges, good, they don't know anything. But given that 70% of our customers are net consumers, those charges, the difference between that is then sent to and billed to the customer. What a monthly true up does instead is that the generation credits, they're still calculated, but they're now added into a NEM credit balance account of sorts, if you will. So any consumption charges are first paid from that NEM credit balance first. And then if the consumption charge is larger than the NEM credits in that account, the customer is then sent a monthly bill and required to pay for it that month. And so the reason why the monthly true up is more customer centric and more customer focused is that it helps customers avoid a large end of the year charge for them. So imagine getting an entire year's worth of electricity charges at one time, right? And so it helps customers budget accordingly. So in the next slide, Sebastian, this kind of just shows what I mean by a monthly billing and true up. So if we take that same example of the previous customer, right? In the months where they're generating, they're getting those generations and now being added to a credit balance account. So let's say the month of June, right? They generate $37 in generation. So they get a credit balance of $37. They don't get a bill from us at all for that month. So that happens across the board in terms of if you're a generator, you don't get a bill from us. But if you take a look at the month of October, the customer is now a net consumer. And so they are now getting charged for that electricity, right? Instead of them receiving a bill from us, that charge is first paid by that credit balance. And so that happens anytime there's net consumption, is that the credit balance pays for that first. But then we get to a really interesting month in February. So if you look in February, the charges for that month are $50, but the customer only has $22 in in credits in their credit balance account. So as opposed to us sending them a bill for $50, the credits cover part of the charge, and then the customer is only billed 27. So they're only billed for part of that, right? Because the credits cover the rest. So if the next month they are still a net consumer, right, and they have another charge of $37, they get billed $37, and so on and so forth. And so again, what this ends up doing is that for a net consumer, which again, 70% of our customers are net customers are net consumers, instead of them receiving one large bill for $102, and in this example, it's a relatively small amount, 100, right? But instead of them receiving one large bill at their true up date, they are now receiving 4 smaller bills that are easier to pay. So the amount still adds up to $102, but now it's spread over multiple months, and it's easier for a customer to pay that and budget accordingly instead of just getting shocked by one large bill. So the next slide, Sebastian. So the benefits of monthly true-up is that it aligns all customer classes on one true-up and billing method. So it simplifies an already confusing program when we go out and talk about it. Because if you recall, our current NEM policy currently says residential customers, you're on a yearly, and then commercial customers, you're on a monthly, right? That's the difference. Why we are recommending a monthly true-up billing is, again, it avoids that bill shock. And there's a potential risk, there is a risk there that at the time of true up, if the customer gets a large bill for, a couple $100 or more, that they could blame us, or they could opt out of our service because they got one large bill. Yeah. And so that is why we recommend the monthly billing. And then also it aligns where the industry is going at large. So in the next slide after this, we're going to be talking about NEM 3.0. But numerous NEM 3.0 proposals are calling for monthly true-ups and billing. So next slide, Sebastian. So what we are recommending to the board is that all NEM customers, regardless of whether they're residential or commercial, be on a monthly true-up and billing method.
So you're talking about a standardized monthly true-up and billing method?
Correct. For all NEM customers.
For everybody that has solar, commercial or residential.
Correct.
Yeah, and doesn't this make it a lot easier for us to, for our rollout first of next year?
It will, it does, yeah. Especially for customers that are enrolling in February, which is considered the winter months. So that will make it easier for customers in that case.
Gary, you have a question, comment?
Yes, I do. When you say standardized, do you mean that there's going to be a particular month where every NEM customer is trued up?
No, and that's a really good point. When I mean standardized, it's just making sure that our NEM policy is updated to say that residential and commercial customers are all going to be on a monthly true-up and billing process. So that's what I mean by standardize it across our NEM policy. Customers are still, they're still going to be on their true-up date.
Well, I am strongly in favor of the monthly true-up and billing. But I have a question about my personal case. My true-up with SDG&E right now is September. And I'm wondering how that affects when I actually start being serviced by SDCP. I think this question is, I heard an answer to this before, and I just wanted to double check on it.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And if we use you as an example, so next year when you enroll into our service in September, because we're enrolling them based on your true update, right? If in that
Okay,
month of,
that's the one I wanted to confirm.
yep,
So
if-
even though everyone without, well, everyone in Encinitas without solar gets enrolled in maybe March or April, I saw a schedule.
February, yeah.
I'm still with this. I will still be with SDG&E until September.
Correct, yeah, because we are enrolling all NEM
Okay.
customers on their true update. So it's a
Okay.
rolling
Uh-huh.
enrollment.
Okay,
Thank you.
Tara?
You mentioned bill shock. There shouldn't be actual shock because they're receiving a statement each month of what is owed if you are on annual billing or monthly. I would think for commercial, it actually will cost SDCP more in human billing time to do it that way. You mentioned a potential consequence would, if someone had a large bill, they'd be opting out. Do we see that? One, does San Diego Community Power have any right, or is there a pathway to get that money that it's owed? And we seeing other CCEs having problems, or people are just abandoning their bill and switching programs?
Yeah, it's a good question. So let me address the commercial piece first in terms of the billing. It wouldn't really have an impact on our billing for human costs, as you put it, for billing. And our back-end billing consultant, Calpine, they're well versed in this and are prepared for that, and especially because they do it for all the other CCAs that they serve. So there's really not a big cost there or a big impact there. In terms of the bill shock, we have heard from a number of CCAs, especially having worked in one before, when they were doing the enrollment at the beginning, a lot of solar customers and a lot of solar installers were saying, we don't like it when customers get trued up on a yearly basis to get this large bill, because as you mentioned, they still get a statement, but I think a lot of customers don't realize what that statement says because it is a very confusing statement. It took a long time to really analyze it. And so if a customer is paying, as an example, $20 a month, and then all of a sudden they receive a $300 bill because they're a net consumer, that is a big bill shock, even though on the statement is showing that they are going to be owing $300 potentially at the true up. And so that is a risk for us, that they could see that and be like, oh, wow. And then see our generation charges on there and say, oh, I need to opt out.
Okay, we have a question or comment from Dennis Will from the public. Dennis?
Give me 1 second. Dennis, you have 3 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. Just a question. I've been a NEM net metering customer for over 8 years, and I like the way it happens. I only had 1 year where I went over $200 at the end of the year. That's when all 4 of my kids were living here, eating up energy. I typically am a net generator, especially last year. Even though I was a net generator, my true up bill was still $2.14, and that's because of the monthly fixed fee that is charged by SDG&E, which one comment is not included in your calculations here. So I'm wondering, is that something that goes on top of these monthly calculations? And secondly, I guess I'd be curious to see a metric. You say 70% of the customers net consumers. What has been their year-end, roundup bill that they've had to pay? Have we seen where a significant amount have had large bills at the end of the year? I've not experienced that. I used to pay over $300 a month. Now at the end of the year, I pay, well under 200, typically under $100, and that's only because of the fixed fees, like I said earlier, not because I use more than I generate. The last comment I'd like to make is my true-up period is November. I typically am more of a consumer during the winter months, but then catch up and get ahead starting in the early spring and throughout the summer to where I generate more by the next true-up period. Under this scenario, I would start paying right away during all the winter months before I would start getting ahead of the game. So is that a consideration on selecting when we could actually start the monthly process? Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have an answer for that question or?
Yeah. So on your first question around the bill charges from SDG&E, those aren't factored into our calculations because those are fixed by SDG&E on their side of the bill, on the transmission distribution side. So what we're talking about here would be only for the generation component that SDCQ controls. For your second question in terms of what is the impact for net generator or net consumers, we haven't looked at that data, but I think that's a great idea to look at, like what is the annual net consumption from customers and see what that would be. It does vary, again, depending on the customer's rate schedule. So it's really hard to put a financial impact to customer because it's very individualized, but that is definitely something that I think we can take back and look at. And then your last question in terms of your true up month and enrolling in monthly billing, you are absolutely correct that in this scenario, if your true up is in November, you would then start getting billed for a net consumption in the winter months on the onset as you enroll. And we can definitely take this as an action to look at potentially what is the impact of that for customers in your situation. But the monthly billing, if we adopt this, would be starting in November on your true update.
Okay, thank you. So do we need to take an action on this?
Chair Price, I see one hand up for Mr. Summers.
Yeah,
sorry, didn't want to interrupt.
Yeah, thanks. I was, I guess, a little bit confused about how we might do this. I'm gonna withdraw my question and wait for if we put a motion to vote. Thanks.
Thank you. Sebastian, so I guess we need to
yeah,
for vote on these two different items, correct?
Yeah, and if I may clarify, Chair, the items before you are not action items. We're seeking your general input for the type of recommendation that Nelson has put together.
Okay. So in that event, we can move on.
Yes, and I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but there is one more hand up, and that is from Gary Johns.
I'm gonna find out where you live, Gary Johns. I'm gonna find out where you live.
Yeah, I know. My reputation precedes me. So if we go to, by excluding all the SDG&E charges, not only connection fees, but also delivery fees, which are
Interesting.
Well, okay, yeah. If we have a monthly system, that means we are being billed monthly and paying monthly per the last example. Is that correct? So, there's something that happens on the true up month, but in fact, we are paying connection fees or whatever else SDG&E fees are as we go along. So from our credit account month by month, is that correct?
That's a really good distinction. So anything that has to do with the transmission and distribution and anything that has to do with SDG&E charges, that is handled separately from the way we would be handling this. So the credit account that we're talking about, like if you're a net generator for that month, those would only cover generation charges. Anything that has to do with transmission and distribution, that would be handled by SDG&E.
But right now, since I I never pay a bill until September. I'm just,
Yeah, so I think
Yeah,
know, I might know
but-
where you're going.
in other words, I pay, right now I pay one bill. Under your scenario, I am paying a bill, one bill a year. In your scenario that you gave, as far as not getting that sticker shock at the end, I'm paying a monthly, there is a monthly charge that I am being billed and can pay on months that I'm a net consumer. But, it seems to me that you have to start thinking about what the other charges are fed in there, because, am I accumulating SDG&E charges now? I don't understand how those, when those charges are being paid in terms of, the annual true up, but the monthly generation credit or payment.
Yeah, so that's a good thing to know is that if we move to this monthly for residential customers, they still true up once a year with SDG&E. And so if they are net consumers, SDG&E will send them a bill for the transmission and distribution charges. But now, if by doing a monthly billing, any generation charges by us, by San Diego Community Power, those are done on a monthly basis. So I would look at the way that I would break this up is that there are two distinct different columns. And so you have the SDG&E side of transmission distribution charges, and then you have ours. And ours is on a monthly and SDG&E's is still on an annual basis. I will note that in general, the industry is moving more towards a monthly purpose. And so in your example, if your true up month is in September, you will still receive a bill in September. If you were a net consumer, again, you would still receive a bill from SDG&E in September for transmission distribution charges. Any minimum bill payments or anything like that, those are all factored in by SDG&E. So what our charges have to do, they don't impact the transmission and distribution side.
But I only get one bill from SDG&E. That is always, in the standard little graph of how a CCA works. It's your electric utility still sends you the bill, right? You don't. The CCA doesn't send out a separate bill. So right now, every month I get a bill and they say, I don't have to pay this because my true up date is, in September. So now I'm going to get a bill from SDG&E and it says, okay, well, there are these charges over here from SDG&E and you don't have to pay those yet. But there's another column to your example that says, and your CCA generation charges are, or in this case, net consumption, if you have to pay something, is over there. It is in a separate column. And so I guess the bill is going to have like two totals. One that's the running total that I may be looking at eventually, and the other is the
monthly total.
A monthly.
The CCA charge, yeah. So you are correct.
Yes.
So our line item on the bill for the CCA charge, the SDC charge, will be presented on the bill, and it will be reflected in the total amount that the customer has to pay for that month. So you are correct.
Okay.
I see two more hands up. Tom, your hand is still up?
Yeah, I just, I think my question or comment kind of straddles both Gary and Tara, because I'm concerned about my own personal net metering as well as the financial well-being of SDCP. I know that SDG&E recently included some extra graphics in regards to my real-time situation, consumption versus production. And I'm wondering if SDCP and Calpine are going to be giving us better information, more information in real time. By the way, I understand that real time access to our meters is a contentious issue, but are we going to be getting, see, I manage my situation basically on a daily basis, so I'm really on top of it. And I know there are certain smart home apps that allow us to do this and keep track of our solar production and our batteries if we have them, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm also concerned about sticker shock or bill shock. I have a tenant who has solar on his roof, and he is a net consumer. So I want to protect him because he rented on the basis of having solar on his house, and I want to protect him from bill shock. So I want to see real-time information disseminated to all of us net metering customers so that we don't get ourselves in a bind. Has there been discussion with us and Calpine in regards to how we're going to prevent, because we want to prevent people from opting out at all. We want to make every effort to minimize opting out. So what steps are we taking in that regards to help our customers not go in the hole?
Yeah, that's a good point. And we have not had those discussions with Calpine yet, but that is something we can take back as an action item to start those discussions with Calpine in terms of what data is presented on the bill and how we can potentially help to make that data a reality, excuse me. Yeah.
I have a question. When will the board make its decision on this item and the previous item?
So we are taking this item, this whole package of things to the board at their next board meeting, which I believe it is on the 27th.
And they will be voting on it, or just it's going to be informational like it is here?
We are going to be taking it as an action item.
I hope they've done their homework on this stuff. Matthew?
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Nelson. This is a very fun and complex issue. So I just wanted to voice the perspective of someone who doesn't have solar, doesn't have a personal bill question, and who is a renter and is thinking about folks who are renters, multifamily folks who down the line, as solar becomes more accessible and is expanding as necessary for us to have more climate resilient local clean energy sources, just ways to make this type of information more accessible in general. And I know like we're all in the early stages and like there's a lot of things going on, but plotting lines down to like develop some kind of program or series or just informational items that can just be super easy to understand for folks to kind of see, and the way that you kind of break it down, Nelson. Maybe it's like an example of a bill and just showing like sitting down, you could even sit down with us. Like I think we all would appreciate a second take at this, but just to show line item like how this works, because a lot of folks who don't really have the time to kind of dig into how their own personal energy systems work, or don't have the years of experience dealing with solar. Like this kind of information would be really, really, really hard to digest. So just trying to think about like accessibility for that kind of stuff. And then also wondering, because I know we're trying to have a conversation about like yearly or monthly true up, and this stuff is again above my head, but I'm wondering, is there any way to do both and give the customer an option? Like if they would prefer a yearly like true up, fine, or if they want to go monthly, that's okay too. I'm assuming that's more working capacity, because I can see the arguments for both sides of which was preferential. I'm thinking about accessibility and equity issues for folks who maybe like a big bill at the end of the year would be a huge sticker shock, and I'm not sure how to pay that off. Whereas other folks might be like, well, I don't want to have to deal with the rigmarole of dealing this on a monthly basis. So just throwing that idea out there and appreciating your time and your work that you put into this, Nelson.
Yeah, so if I may, Chair, respond to the question.
Yeah,
comment?
quickly, because we have some other stuff on the agenda that's going to be as contentious or more contentious than this.
Yeah, and I really appreciate your comment. In terms of the education, what I presented to you is definitely more technical, and I think that is predominantly because of your role to advise. And so the education piece is incredibly important. And what I want to do as we start to do the enrollment for NEM customers in the next year is to provide more resources in terms of what a sample bill would look like for customers. I know that some other CCAs, and I worked on this, they did videos that explain like the basics of what energy metering is, and then more in-depth videos in terms of understanding their bill. So I have a background and history in working on those, and so I'm definitely open to that. And it's something that we can work on over the course of the next year to do the education component be more friendly. With regards to your comment in terms of can we do both, right? I think that's something we can definitely take back in and talk with Calpine about.
And before we have one more hand up, and hopefully this will be the last hand so that we can move on. But Tom said something very interesting about he has an app. And I was wondering, and this is probably to somebody else in San Diego Community Power, but it would be interesting for San Diego Community Power to have an app that may be similar to the one that Tom utilizes, that could actually, help people like myself that has solar to actually understand this at a granular level at my house. Part of what we have to do as the Community Advisory Committee is we have to figure out how we're going to narrate this to our respective communities. And that's why we ask so many questions, because, we have to figure out, like Tom has to figure out what he's going to tell his renter. And, you just extrapolate that on a larger level. We have to do this in the community. So we have these types of questions and are looking for narratives that we can give to our community. But, with all that being said, this is a transitional period, and there's always confusion in the middle of a transition. And we're just going to have to, at the end of the day, we're going to have to work it out and make it do what it do. Let me see who has their hand up. Dennis Will. I knew it was Dennis. Dennis, you're the last comment on this.
No. Thank you. I'm sorry, but you piqued my interest. I guess I'd said earlier that last year I only paid $2. It was actually $2.19 in the true up. And the only reason I paid was because of the fixed $13 a month fee that is independent of the usage or generation that the household has. So my question is now, if SDG&E is going to continue to charge that regardless, I may get ahead with regard to the generation each month as you're speaking, but I'm going to get now $150 a year bill from SDG&E due to the fixed costs that are built into every electrical bill. Is that true?
Chair, would you like me to respond?
Yeah, very quickly, shortly, and abruptly.
Okay. The short answer is not exactly. And that is because SDG&E is still tracking the transmission distribution as well. So if you're a net generator as a whole for that month, the transmission distribution charges are also going to be negative. So I'll stop there per the chairman.
And if I may interrupt for a minute, Dennis, I want to acknowledge your questions, and you're definitely very knowledgeable about the whole NEM setup. We encourage you to continue sending those questions over. So if you can reach out to us at customer service@sdcommunitypower.org, and we can follow up with you on a case-by-case basis. Again, I don't want to stifle your comments, but I want to make sure that you do seem to have a lot of questions, and we want to make sure we answer them.
Yes, and they're valid questions, and they do need to be answered. And we need to figure out a process to answer questions like that. So, like, hypothetically, you offered to Dennis to, have a one-on-one conversation. We need to find a way to do that with everybody, whether it's a virtual session or something.
Yeah.
Okay, is that all? Do you have what you need from this, Sebastian?
Don't look at me. This is Nelson's item.
Nelson, do you have what you need to take back to the board?
Yes, I do. So thank you so much for.
We like
that
all this,
discussion.
but we have some concerns. We like all this, but we have some concerns.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nelson.
Thanks, Nelson.
Thank you.
Here we go.
I do want to acknowledge Board Chair Mosca just joined us. Apologies for not sending you the correct Zoom link.
Not a problem. Just had a ton of meetings today, so it's probably
Joe, can you
my
go
fault.
off camera, Joe? Off camera. Yeah, there you go. Because that hurt.
Sorry about that.
Looked like a peach or something.
Yeah, well, I do live in Encinitas, and so instead of plugging in and listening to your meeting, I decided to get on my bike and ride to the beach. So just enjoying a little bit of Encinitas, San Diego coastline right now. But am thinking about you guys and thinking about everything that you guys do. So just wanted to kind of tag in before you guys close out your meeting. I see that you have a couple more items, but wanted to thank you guys again for everything that you do. And just, I know that our staff probably already talked about this, but we have a strategic planning session coming up. And I know that our facilitator sent out a link to a questionnaire, a survey, I guess you can put it. But I hope that you guys will take a moment to fill out that survey. We really do want your participation. We really feel it's necessary to include everybody, our community advisory committee, all of our stakeholders in this process, so we can really kind of have a very robust, broad discussion about what our values are, what our mission statement should be, and what our goals are going to be for the coming year. So I hope you do participate in that. And again, thank you so much for everything that you guys do. Sorry for the background noise. I'm on my cell phone, like I said. But I will listen in on the rest of your meeting, and then I'll see you guys soon. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, Sebastian.
Great. Laura, are you taking this item or is it me? Can't remember.
I can take it.
Okay.
Thanks for putting the slides together, but I'm ready to go.
Of course.
Okay. Hi, everyone. So this is Groundhog Day, AB 1139 edition. I think this is the third meeting we'll be talking about AB 1139. But anyways, today we'll be asking the CAC to formally vote on a recommendation to the board for a legislative position on AB 1139. I know that we've discussed this bill previously, but I just want to give a quick refresher and sort of go over it before we dive in. Thank you, Sebastian. So yeah, we're going to go over what is in this bill. This is the NEM bill that we've talked about before. I'll give a little bit of background about where it's been in the legislative process, where it's going, how it's been amended, and what this committee has talked about previously. Next slide, please. So the bill is authored by Lorena Gonzalez, one of our local legislators. Originally, the bill would have phased NEM 1.0 and 2.0 customers to the new tariff by 2024. The bill originally would have also expanded the CARE discount from 30 to 35% to 40 to 40%. It would have instituted monthly grid access charges, and it also would have changed the credit for excess generation from retail to wholesale rates. The bill also originally set aside hundreds of millions of dollars to discount initial purchases of renewable generation facilities for multifamily housing or those in underserved communities, and also allocated money to provide an additional discount for CARE customers on the Green Tariff Shared Renewable Rate, which is called Eco Choice in San Diego. So you guys might remember that I think the first meeting that we discussed this bill, it was kind of just a discussion as one of many bills that I covered, and you asked me my thoughts on it, and I was really conflicted because I was like, well, there's some good things in it. There's a lot of money for, getting more solar to low income or communities of concern. But forget what was then, because this is now, and all of that went out the door. So we can move to the next slide. The bill was gutted and amended, and it's been amended again and again since then. The bill's changed a lot in the last few weeks. It now has two co-authors, Quirk and Carrillo. The bill would now phase customers to a new tariff after they've been on their previous tariff for 10 years. It would require the CPUC to ensure alternatives for growth in disadvantaged communities, and it would require that the NEM 3.0 tariff be based on equal cost and benefits. Certain parts of the bill, such as monthly fixed charges, interconnection fees, and changing from retail to wholesale compensation, will only apply if the CPUC doesn't adopt a new tariff by February 1st, 2022. And I'll get into the NEM 3.0 proceeding later, but just as like context for this slide, the CPUC schedule right now would have them adopting a decision, or they'd have a proposed decision by December. So they would have a decision by January, so they would meet this deadline. Just a little bit of context. To continue with what the bill says now, it also would strike part of the statute that currently requires sustainable growth of distributed energy resources, and there's no longer provisions in there about expanding the CARE discount. There's no longer the set-asides for hundreds of millions for purchasing new renewable generation, and there's nothing about additional discounts for CARE customers on those GTSR rates. Next slide, please. So the bill passed out of the Assembly Utilities and Energy Committee on April 21st. That was the day before our last board meeting. And then the bill was sent to Appropriations, and it's been amended a few times since it's been there. If the bill makes it out of Appropriations, which it probably will, because Gonzalez is the chair of Appropriations, then it will go to the Assembly floor for a vote. And if it passes out of the Assembly, then it'll go to the Senate and sort of go through the same process on the Senate side that it did on the Assembly side, which would be getting referred to a committee, and if it gets out of committee, then it goes to Appropriations, then it goes to the floor, and that whole fun cycle again. Next slide, please. So the first time that we discussed AB 1139, it's when I gave my first presentation to this committee back in March. I gave an overview of the bills that we're tracking, and there were concerns expressed at that time. I shared that I thought the bill would be amended. It was. Then at the April board meeting, at the April CAC meeting, the committee took a vote to send a message to the board of directors stating that rooftop solar and storage should be prioritized in our region and within our communities of concern. Also at that meeting, it was discussed that if AB 1139 moved out of the Assembly Utilities and Energy Committee, a vote to oppose the bill could be taken at the next regularly scheduled CAC meeting, which brings us to today. The bill did pass out the Assembly Utilities and Energy Committee. As I mentioned, it's currently in appropriation. So we wanted to tee this up for discussion again today to see if the CAC would like to vote to make a recommendation to the board regarding a formal position on AB 1139. So I will pause there and see if there are questions.
Sorry, I was on mute. I understand from a political perspective that there's another bill that can conflict or complement this bill, and there may be some hesitancy to push back hard on AB 1139 because of the benefits of the other bill. Is that correct?
That is correct. SB 612, which is the Cal CCA sponsored legislation on PCIA, is currently opposed by Q, who is sponsoring AB 1139. Senator Portantino, who is the author of SB 612, is currently working with Q on seeing if we can have their opposition removed or reduced on SB 612. As you guys know, SB 612 is SDCP's priority for this legislative session because while distributed energy resources and solar and storage are very important to our mission, which we haven't defined yet, see strategic planning meeting where we will define our mission, but it's obviously something that's very important to us. PCIA is something that could kill us financially. And so, I think that that's why you haven't seen a lot of CCAs, or actually no CCAs to date, have taken a position on AB 1139 because Gonzalez is a very powerful legislator. And I don't think that anyone wants to get crosswise with her on AB 1139 because it could jeopardize the success of SB 612.
And then and there's always the chance that she will kill 612 anyhow, right? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, she does. She controls the appropriations committee. So when SB 612 hopefully gets to the assembly, hopefully goes to the committee process, then it would go to her committee, assembly appropriations. And if the bill got moved to the suspense file, which it could, we would need her to pull it out of the suspense file in order for it to make it to a floor vote to potentially become a law. So we might need to be asking her to save that bill on that side of the in the assembly, if that happens.
And that is basically why we're not, why CCAs are not as aggressive as some folks think they need to be, including me, on AB 1139, correct?
Well, and I've talked with a lot of CCAs about this bill, and it just seems that their communities aren't talking to them about AB 1139 the way that we've been talking about it. So, when you guys are the ones who make recommendations to the board, and we listen, and that's why I'm teeing this up now. But I do think that's why there has been some hesitation. I think that if a community is not as concerned about a bill, then then a CCA is not going to take a position on it. And I think that across California, there just hasn't been other CCAs aren't hearing from their CAC the way that we are all hearing from you on this bill.
Interesting. Any questions?
I have my hand
Anna
raised.
Webb? Yeah, Anna.
Thank you. I just want to wrap my head around, Laura, we can do this on the side, but if you could send me some talking points, because I can totally push this out to the community and get, people, I don't know if we're looking at letter writing or it seems to me, looking over this bill and the amendments that were made, that that it's been a little gutted, but then I'd like to hear comments from other people just to wrap my head and understand how that affects us specifically and the community. So talking points would be good.
Okay, well, I don't think, we haven't officially taken a position yet, which is what we were planning to do. But I do know that there's, I know Tara, Vice Chair Hammond has a lot of material on this bill.
Good. I want to hear from her.
Okay. We'll go to Erica, then we'll come back to Tom.
Excuse me, Chair Price, do you want to entertain public comments now?
I thought we were entertaining all comments, but
Yeah.
Yes.
Cool. Give me 1 second, Erica. We'll pull out my handy dandy timer. All right, Erica, you have 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Erica Morgan here for the California Alliance for Community Energy. And I have a question from Laura. And that is, what is the relationship between SB 612 and this recent order concerning the phase 2 decision on the PCIA cap and allocations? It seems like there is a lot of material in there about how portfolio items in the PCIA portfolio will be offered and allocated to CCAs and other LSEs under this new order. My question is whether SB 612 will retain the same priority for you all vis-a-vis some of the other more fundamental issues that are wrapped up in AB 1139, even as it's been gutted, the sustainable growth of the industry being the thing of highest concern to me.
Sure. So sorry, were you done or did I cut you off?
No, I'm done. Thanks. Sorry.
Okay. Sure, no problem. So on the question of, yes, there is a proposed decision at the CPUC right now regarding the same issues that SB 612 is addressing. But what I can share with you is that basically there were 3 parts, like 3 different allocations that were a part of the working group 3 proposal. which are reflected in SB 612. And those are resource adequacy, greenhouse gas-free resources, and renewable portfolio standard resources. The proposed decision rejects an allocation for resource adequacy. The proposed decision also rejects an allocation for greenhouse gas-free energy. And the proposed decision only accepts partially the renewable portfolio standard allocation. So SB 612 would be better for SDCP and for CCAs generally, because it would require an allocation be made for all three of those resource types, whereas the PD would only give an allocation for RPS starting in 2024. So right now, customers are paying for all of those resources, PCIA, RA, RPS, in the PCIA. And right now, it's at the utility's discretion whether they offer any of those resources to CCAs. And the PD is a slight improvement because CCAs could get an allocation for RPS starting in 2024, but SB 612 is significantly better because, to be very honest with you, greenhouse gas-free energy doesn't really mean much in San Diego because there's not any allocation that we would get. It's really the RA that is important to us, and we would not be getting that through the proposed decision the way that it is right now.
You're pretty good at just it. Better you than me. Tom Summers?
Yeah, you are. This question might, I'm dying to hear from Tara, but this question might be a little weird. I know the bill has been gutted somewhat. Is it still considered a solar industry killer the way it was before? I'm sorry to ask for your opinion, but I'm really curious. I haven't heard back from my solar industry contacts. They didn't seem to be too pleased with the modified proposals.
Absolutely, without a doubt. The solar industry is planning a rally on Wednesday at the Capitol in Sacramento opposing this.
And your chair is going to attend that said rally, just so you know.
Nice.
I want to go too.
I'll send you info, Tom. But no, the bill just, Anna kind of asked what are the impacts. It took out elements numerous of us supported, which was in expanding the care. There were some additional incentives. The current analysis of this bill shows it will be more expensive for anyone with on virtual net metering to have solar than to not have solar. So it kills the market for renters. And they changed the fees. Before it was going to be much more expensive for almost everyone to have solar. Now it's very, very vague. So it's harder to know that true impact, but it will it will have an impact. And that's why the solar industry, including local 569 contractors, are continuing to oppose it because they feel like it will completely put out of business the Center for Sustainable Energy, Grid Alternatives, as well as other administrators of the state rebate program for SOMA, Solar on Multifamily Affordable Housing, millions of dollars every year intended for communities of concern to help with solar, are opposing this bill because it's very disingenuous. It, as Eddie likes to say, it's weaponizing communities of concern. And to me, it's a clear utility win because everyone else is losing with this bill. And I see Micah's on the line, but from what I would assume, even local 569 would have a net job loss from this with those local solar companies from environmental justice, economic. People who say, which I disagree with, that net metering is a subsidy. There's various studies that show solar is a net benefit to the grid, rooftop solar specifically. But the utilities aren't saying, or this bill isn't saying, we're going to reassess everyone's rates and lower rates because of this. The utilities will profit more from this. Sempra will have more natural gas used from this. So everyone loses. A just livable future is at stake. It would set a precedent for the rest of the country to kill rooftop solar, to be using more dirty fossil fuels. And I see it as the utilities win.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tara and Laura. Both of you ladies are really so far ahead of a lot of us here, and really appreciate you with all your information. Thanks.
Thank you. Matthew, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo Tara's comments and just flag how concerning this bill is. It really is a utility bill from my perspective, and just high level analysis of what's going on here. This is an attempt to kill the solar industry, to destroy good green jobs, and to instead shift the focus to utility scale out in the desert, where we're going to have more issues and complications as our climate crisis worsens. It's all about profit and motivation and pitting groups against each other. And unfortunately, they're using this equity equity language to weaponize against local distributed energy resources. And so rooftop solar. So it's very concerning, and I am hoping that SDCP can stand up and take a position in opposition to this bill. I know that there are a lot of political considerations in making that decision, but at the end of the day, it's just super disappointing that we're in this situation with, honestly, from my personal perspective, an elected official who I really respect and admire. But it is what it is. It's a utility bill, and it's just super unfortunate.
Agree.
Tara, you have your hand up?
I do. Anna asked, how does this impact San Diego Community Power? So if anyone, the nearly 90,000 solar customers, there would be fees on the SDG&E side that San Diego Community Power couldn't avoid. So many of us for 10 years fought for a community choice energy program to have local rooftop solar that employs local people where there are community benefits. We wanted community programs, which things we talked about, incentives for solar, incentives for storage, incentives for electric vehicle charging, among others. All of that goes away. If solar doesn't make sense financially, and then it crushes that and it hurts people's economics, obviously the environmental side. And I think this could cause the wealthy to get energy storage and disconnect from the grid, truly leaving stranded assets and disproportionately passing on that burden. And so I don't believe net metering is doing that, but I do believe this could cause that to happen. And so I also emphatically support San Diego Community Power coming out in opposition to this bill. I do understand the politics behind it. The last two meetings, we were, I think, tiptoeing around and made it more vague, where let's do a letter supporting net metering and support protecting rooftop solar and expanding equitable access. But I do hope San Diego Community Power, the board, does take an opposed stance, because I think that's needed, and hopefully other CCAs would follow suit.
Yeah, and I think, there needs to be a much more aggressive letter, because the legislation has got more aggressive towards communities of concern and towards the success of CCAs in general. Gary John?
I'm just wondering if anybody else has an opinion, and that is, I'll say, not as strongly opposed as Tara and Matt. And if not, I want to suggest that since we have an action item on this, that that someone make a motion. But Tara, you would have to call for a motion in that case. I'm not going to usurp your power here.
Okay, Tom Summers.
Yeah, I just want to add to what Tara just said. It's not just the wealthy that will withdraw from the grid. A lot of blue collar types like myself, I've been off the grid most of my life. I've been manufacturing both electricity and water aboard ships all my life, and I'm perfectly capable of doing it with my home as well. So I will definitely be bailing out. So I strongly oppose this 1139, and I do understand why we've been prioritizing 612, our focus. But yeah, we have to. I'll make a motion if Tara doesn't, but we have to oppose this. Thanks.
Thank you. You know, and I'd like to, I don't know if this is whatever, but if Micah is still on the call, I would like to hear, you know, just out of curiosity, what your union says about this. However, if you don't feel like speaking, that's okay too. Oh, she got her hand up.
All right, let me go ahead and unmute you, Micah.
Thank you.
And just let me set the timer just to be consistent across everybody. Oop, calculator. All right. Go ahead, Micah.
Hi, everyone. Micah Matrosky, IBW 569 environmental organizer. IBW Local 569 and our State Association of Electrical Workers supports this bill. We think that there are opportunities to advance solar in a more equitable way in the state, and that there are opportunities to actually still build a lot of solar, and that this bill, by advancing, will help support and do that. And so I know that there's a lot of details about this bill, and if anybody on the advisory committee would like to meet with us to discuss it at further length, would be happy to get together.
Thank you, Micah. I don't see any more hands raised.
One more.
Oh, Carolyn.
Hi. Oh, let me. I do have to say that I have some questions and concerns about the other ratepayers and how all ratepayers, how will this help all ratepayers in San Diego Community Power? Because there are some equity issues in the bill, but there are a lot of connections, as you've all talked about. And I don't know how it's changed since the beginning because Laura, as you said, a lot of those things have been taken out.
Right.
So I don't know what's been taken out or what's left in, but I don't know how, as I said, I don't know how all the other ratepayers are in general are affected, and how this would affect San Diego Community Power helping all of its ratepayers. So I've heard some of the arguments that people are saying, but I don't know why that's the argument. So I don't know why it would kill solar, and because I see that the new buildings are rolling out with solar, or new residential, and then eventually new buildings. So I'd like to fill in some of those gaps a little bit more to understand, because from my understanding and what I've seen is that in some ways, all the other ratepayers are subsidizing the solar owners, and that system can't, keep perpetuating itself the way that it is either. So those are, so I'm here in front of all the people that can tell me the best answers to those. So thank you.
Vice Chair.
I'm happy to help answer that unless you want to take it or someone else would like to.
Go ahead.
So there's various studies out there. There are some utility support, fund support that show solar shifts costs. There are other studies that show solar is a net benefit. The ones the utilities like referencing don't show a handful of externalities, and I can send you a document that analyzes those. LA Times, Sammy Roth, environment reporter, he at the end of January issued an article that said solar could save US ratepayers $473 billion, and not doing rooftop solar could cost ratepayers $385 billion. Solar reduces stress on the grid. Solar reduces the need for peaker plants. Solar reduces the need for desert solar. And to me, this is what the bill is about. It is to kill rooftop solar. How? To make solar not make sense financially so nobody does it again. There are still rules. Solar is allowed to happen, but unless you're a very hardcore environmentalist, the studies show it kills the return on investment. The initial analysis, and the bill has changed a little bit, took a care customer, a low-income customer who has a longer payback period for solar than a non-care customer typically 11 years right now. This bill was pushing it to 45 years, 20 years past when the system warranty would expire. It was taking someone with virtual net metering and affordable housing, it would cost 60% more to have that solar than to not have solar at all. Now, the last analysis I saw on that, which wasn't finalized and published, it was 20%. So when solar is more expensive than not having solar, and when there are these fees that you can't avoid because it ends retail credit. Today we were talking about if you give energy at a time when it's 19 cents you're being charged, and you can get a credit for 19 cents, that all goes away. But there was a grid access fee that's now been watered down into more vague fees, but it's still anticipated that that is going to be very, very detrimental to the return. And then getting rid of the wholesale credit, it gets rid of grandfathering. And again, everyone loses their grandfathering, the 20 years that's currently committed. Now, the latest amendment on Wednesday, it's a 10-year grandfathering, but people who are in 10, 15, 20, 30-year loans and leases may not save money. They're going to be paying these fees, plus they lose the retail credit, plus they already have their solar financing payment. They could be paying much, much more to have solar. So when you're paying more to have solar, it's not going to pencil out. Even free systems with fully subsidized money from the state, the last analysis was showing those don't pencil out. So that's how the industry gets killed. When we kill rooftop solar, then to get to our 100% clean energy goals in California, we're going to use utility scale solar. Recent studies show to get to our 100% state goal, we needed to increase rooftop solar, I think 3 times, same with desert solar. So desert solar, utilities own, utilities get RPS credit, renewable portfolio standard credit, and they can profit from the transmission lines that need to get built. And then they pass those on to ratepayers. They passed a lot of costs, millions and millions and millions of dollars of cost shifting, whether it's SDG&E's $1 million a day profit, whether it's programs that they've overcharged millions of dollars to ratepayers, and their infrastructure and their fires. These long transmission lines, they have caused fires. Ratepayers then have to pay those. So not doing solar will increase rates. And PSPS events are when utilities are planning these power outages. We should be investing in communities of concern, communities in schools, in community centers, doing energy storage, microgrids, being more resilient, being cleaner, providing local jobs, and not killing an industry so the utility can make more profits while we're worsening the climate crisis and hurting families who have solar. Like a Grid Alternatives customer, free solar, very small, low income to qualify for that system. They're going to lose their benefit so the utility can make more money, is what it's going to be. It's not like those money, Carolyn, if you believe there is that rate cost shift, it's not like it's being reassessed and given to ratepayers, it's going to the utilities.
Yeah, no, I should have said at the very beginning, I'm like 100% for solar.
Oh, no, I know that, but I'm just saying, so that's fair. It's
concerned about everybody, but that was great. And so now I feel much better because I don't want to just, not say what I'm thinking about things as I look around, my communities too. So thank you.
A lot of schools have leased. Schools are being hit very hard. Everyone who's gone solar and those who financed it, who couldn't afford the cash purchase, are getting hit very bad. But virtual net metering, the farms and multifamily housing are hit the worst. So to say this is an equity bill is, to me, very disingenuous.
Okay, well, thank you, Tara. Thank you for that explanation. It is now 3:30, and I believe this meeting is over at 3:30, and I can't say bye because we have to take action. So can somebody make a motion?
If I may interject there, Chair Price, there are 2 other items on your agenda.
Okay, so that means we need a quick motion right now. So would somebody like to make a motion on AB 1139 and what we send to or suggest to the Board of Directors?
I make a motion that we take a vote and to send a letter to the board, either supporting this bill or not supporting this bill. Strongly, either way.
Okay, how strongly?
Well, I was trying to be, okay, I make a motion that we vote on this bill. And with the results, we write a letter to the board, either supporting it or strongly opposing it. Very strongly.
Okay, well, I think that's where we're at now, whether or not to send something to the board that opposes or send something to the board that supports. So
Right, but I would imagine we would have to vote and have a majority.
right.
Yeah.
Can we get a second for this motion?
No.
No, what? We can't get a second, or?
No second.
Pardon me? Did you say something?
No second.
No second. Okay, so the motion dies without a second. But we do need a motion. So would somebody like to make another motion?
I make a motion. I make a motion that we strongly oppose. We send a message to our board of directors to help us in opposition to this atrocious bill.
With some
I'll
of the
second it.
language. With some of the language that Tara mentioned of the reason why it's so detrimental?
That would be good.
Okay.
Can I suggest a friendly amendment, Tom?
Yeah.
Not only are we asking them to help us, we want them to oppose. We already voted the last two meetings, even the last one was the only one that was valid. That we want them to take action. We want them to come out supporting, protecting solar and expanding equitable access. But I think we want them to oppose, and we want them to publicly oppose and do what they can to help defeat this, so we can then spend our time on other city or community power efforts and supporting 612 and other bills that will benefit the community.
What she said.
Okay, what she said. So this has been moved and seconded, I believe. David, so we're gonna move to talk about it.
Excuse me, Chair Price, can we just clarify that motion a little bit better?
We want to send to the board a strongly worded recommendation that we recommend that the board of directors of San Diego Community Power strongly opposes AB 1139 for a variety of reasons that Tara mentioned about communities of concern and equity and in jobs and all that kind of stuff.
Got it.
Got it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Sorry to interject because I'm typing this down. Who ended up making the motion? I think David Harris seconded. Was that Tom?
I believe Tom made the motion, and who seconded that motion? Was it you, David?
Yes.
And David
Yes.
seconded it. Seconded the motion.
Thank you.
All in favor of the motion, say aye. I don't know how you're gonna do that.
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Sebastian, take a vote, please.
Yes, Chair. Let's see, Gary Johns,
Aye.
Tom Summers,
Aye.
David Harris,
Aye.
Carolyn Schofield,
Aye.
Matthew Vasilakis.
Aye.
Let's see, Secretary Webb,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hammond,
Aye.
Chair Price.
Yay.
Thank you, sir. Motion passes.
Thank you. And thank you for the spirited discussion on this issue. What's next on the agenda, Sebastian?
You know,
More NEM.
more NEM stuff.
Oh,
But wait,
Lord have mercy.
but wait, there's more. I told you it was gonna be our weekend plans.
Well, we just
Okay.
did this. Didn't we just discuss and provide input to the board?
That was for the legislation. This is for the CPUC proceeding.
You guys are
Okay.
gonna be experts. So
Okay,
This is your formal education in NEM now.
okay.
I don't think that this should take too long, I hope, but I've been wrong before.
Well, you
Okay,
run
so we're,
it, so it's on
all
you.
right. All right, let's go. So we're going to talk about the NEM 3.0 proceeding at the CPUC. Next slide, please. So if you listened to the last board meeting, this is a repeat. Back in 2016, the CPUC committed to reviewing the current NEM tariff, which is NEM 2.0. They opened a rulemaking last year in order to do that. We're a party to that proceeding, which means we can comment and file things, which is cool. So it's called the NEM 3.0 rulemaking. Back in March, 18 proposals for a successor to the current tariff were filed by a wide range of parties. On the one end of the spectrum, there's the investor-owned utilities, there's solar developers on the other end of the spectrum. Everyone else is probably somewhere in between. The proposals vary a lot. Some of them suggest things like a monthly grid access charge. There's a lot of equity proposals in there. There's discussion about annual true-ups, monthly true-ups. So it's all over the place. I have like hundreds of pages of, summaries that I've seen and read on this thing. So let's go to the next slide, please. So this is the current schedule for the proceeding, which was pushed out a little bit. In 2 weeks, E3 is going to provide the results of a cost effectiveness analysis that's currently being performed. Opening testimony will be filed in June. Rebuttal testimony will be filed in July. Then there's evidentiary hearings, which is kind of like a fun court proceeding where you get to ask questions of people on their direct testimony and, corner them and make them, show why they're wrong and their factual showings and things like that. And then if there are settlement talks, those have to be completed by August 27th. I'll be honest, I've heard with you that settlement discussions are unlikely to happen and or be fruitful. I haven't heard anything yet about settlement discussions. And on that same date, August 27th is when opening briefs would be due. And so, and then there would be 90 days after closing briefs before we get a proposed decision. So I mentioned this earlier. We would expect to see a proposed decision at the end of this year, and then a proposed decision would usually become final within about a month. So that would be by January of next year, just in time for the deadline in the AB 1139 bill. Next slide, please. So this is the last slide. You'll be happy to know we're working with a group of CCAs in this proceeding, and we've preliminarily discussed things that we might want to discuss if there are settlement talks. But we're also thinking about potentially submitting briefing later this summer. And so we wanted to let you know some of the things that we are initially thinking about, sort of the areas where we might consider supporting proposals of other parties, in briefing. These include things like indicating our support for distributed energy resources and rooftop solar generally. Things like supporting monthly true-ups, which would be consistent with our discussion earlier on SDCP staff recommendation around monthly true-ups. There's a lot of proposals for how to incentivize and encourage storage adoption, which is something I think is non-controversial and something we definitely want to do. Solar's value really increases if we can charge batteries when there's an excess amount of renewable energy on the grid and discharge it at times when we need it, like in peak hours. And then also there's a lot of ideas around how to bring more solar to communities of concern. And so we think we'd want to support those equity proposals and ideas. And so there's not really an action item here, more just, an update. And if you want to have discussion on the NEM 3.0 proceeding, we can certainly do that. I'm continuing to meet with the joint CCAs about this proceeding on a bi-weekly basis. And our next steps right now are just reviewing that cost-effective analysis. It's going to come out in 2 weeks. And we hope that that would sort of further guide our thinking around what we might submit in briefing later this summer. And that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. I have a question. I've been waiting for somebody that seemed smart enough to answer this question. Have the utilities always been this diametrically opposed to NEM? Like NEM 1, they were opposed to that as strongly as they are to everything else?
You know, I think that I was single digit ages old when NEM 1.0 came out. So I can't speak to the attitude of the utilities to NEM at that point in time. But if I had to guess, and I will because why not, I'm going to guess that they've become more opposed to it over time because as solar adoption has increased, it's become more of an issue for them.
Competition to them.
I see Chair Hammond, Vice Chair Hammond nodding her head, which, you know, she's definitely smarter than I am. So I'll take that.
Okay. Well, thank you. Are there any questions for this presenter? I don't see any hands up.
We beat you guys to death with NEM today.
Okay, well, thank you. Oh, there's one hand. There we go. Matthew.
Yes, sorry. Laura, thank you, by the way. Your legislative analysis always impresses me, and I really appreciate it. And I think the only thing I have is not necessarily a question, it's just a comment. I really appreciate Bernadette coming here and from representative from SDG&E wanting to talk about collaboration. I think when it comes to solar, you know, we'd love to find a way to not be constantly fighting over this issue and to stop the utility attacks against local distributed energy resources and on a number of other fronts. So just want to really elevate NEM and set that as an example of, you know, there are huge differences and chasms here, and we're really going to need to work hard if we really want that kind of collaboration moving forward. So thank you, Laura. Appreciate this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, concerns, comments? Well, I think you got off easy. Uh-oh. Tom, you're making noise, Tom. You want to say something? Or you just want to show off your Tesla batteries? What do you want to do, Tom?
No, I appreciate what Matthew just said about Bernadette coming and offering her olive branch. I think she's going to have to bring the whole tree, maybe the whole orchard. I'd love to see SDG&E get out of the generation business altogether, which they have indicated that they might be the first of the big three to do so. But getting back to the issue at hand here, what exactly are we doing? Are we just trying to encourage the board to support some of these bullet points, Laura?
Yeah, so at the last board meeting, Chair Mosca asked that we come back with a more comprehensive discussion around NEM. And so that includes all of the pieces that you all have heard today. There's the net surplus compensation, which is more of a rate setting piece. There's the legislative AB 1139 piece. And then there's also the NEM 3.0 CPUC proceeding piece. And so the thinking in coming here today is to, you know, sort of give you a preview of you know, what we plan to bring to the board and see if you had input or different ideas beyond what I'm putting forward here today.
Okay, thanks.
Sure, thank you.
I would, because on this slide right here, it says support equity proposals, ideas for increasing adoption in communities of concern. You know, what I find in a lot of these equity conversations, that word is just thrown in there to check a box. I would really like to see us start working as an organization on proposals and ideas for increasing adoption in communities of concern, some real tangible programmatic ideas and philosophies. So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, and I think SDCP absolutely agrees with you. And I know that Sebastian has been working very hard on the Disadvantaged Community Green Tariff and Community Solar Program. And we are looking to file an advice letter pretty quickly. I think we're working internally through, you know, the nitty gritty, but I think we're pretty close there. And so, you know, even though we've only been serving customers for 2 months, you know, that's something that's definitely a top priority for our organization as well. So I hope that you will be seeing not just words, but more real action that we can bring back to this committee and the board very shortly.
Thank you. Sebastian, does that conclude our meeting? Oh, Lord, here go Anna and Gary. Anna?
Well, actually, Gary was first.
Okay, Gary?
Yes. Do we have an action here to take something to the board?
No, there's no,
Sebastian?
sorry, Sebastian can answer.
No, or Laura, I don't care.
I think
Yeah,
they were just filling us out and paying tribute to what they said at the other meeting was to come back with more information on this particular item.
That's correct.
So can I interpret this that we haven't done the homework enough to bring back anything specific to the board on this issue at this time?
I think it's not so much that we haven't done the homework, but part of the reason I put this.
I'm sorry if that sounded hostile or aggressive.
I think what I wanted to indicate today is that, you know, the proposals in the proceeding are out. That's done. We're still waiting on the testimony, right? Because any party can put forward a proposal, but it's not like factually trued up until you have the testimony that's submitted, until there are evidentiary hearings and cross-examination. So like what one party claims are the facts in their proposal, they say, this is a fact, or this cost shift is occurring, sort of all of that will get trued up through the testimony, cross-examination, rebuttal testimony, that whole process. So what are the facts in this like CPUC case are yet to be seen, right? It's kind of like opening arguments have been made, but we don't really know like what the facts are. And so the point of this is to let you know that, you know, the joint CCAs are reviewing the proposals. We will, when the cost effectiveness analysis is out, we're going to go through that. When the testimony is out, we're going to go through that. And as we get more information, that will help us shape what our briefing might look like later this summer. But so at this point, it's the story is still kind of unfolding. And as we get more information, we will have more concrete ideas about what we can say in briefing later this year.
To your point, I believe it was your point earlier about our community advisory committee being, you know, a lot more aggressive than others. What is the next aggressive CCA?
On NEM?
No, yeah, the next most aggressive community advisory committee in CCA.
I would correct, I think that you're passionate. So I don't know if I said aggressive, but I think that you're all very passionate, especially about NEM. The only other CCA, like when it comes to NEM, the only other CCA I've connected with that has been hearing from their local advocates and solar industry is Redwood Coast Energy Authority. Clean Power Lines shared with me they heard from one customer, and I've checked in with other CCAs, and it seems like this issue is just flying under the radar everywhere else in California.
Right.
And I'm not sure why that is, but that's what I know.
Okay, thank you. Anna?
And yes, I just wanted to circle back on your comment regarding, you know, equity, like you said, but, you know, I mean, there are residents in San Diego County, such as San Ysidro and other areas that don't even have running water. And we need to make sure with this project that we can include, they may not be homeowners, they may be renting, reach out to the homeowners and see, you know, how we can enable the least of us to come up, you know, to come up where everyone should be, because
Right.
this is disturbing.
You know, and I'll say this to that. You know, one of the reasons why I'm so invested in renewable energy and solar in particular is because when I first realized that the sun crossing over my roof creates an economic situation, just because the sun came up, we can address a whole lot of community issues economically. And so some of these, you know, AB 139 and these other things are dismantling that opportunity and making sure that all that money goes to utilities. And that's like disgusting to me. But I'm gonna shut up before I go into my Black Panther speech. Sebastian, are we done?
You got technically one more item, but I think this one should be
Okay.
fairly quickly. So just the typical one, discussion of potential agenda items for the next board meeting. You've already talked at length about one of them. So unless you want to give up your Friday, I think you can go ahead. But obviously,
I don't have any more. Does anyone else on the committee have anything that they would like to directly be presented to the board as an agenda item or have me speak on at the next board of directors meeting?
And if sorry, and if I may clarify, Chair Price, any substantial like action or agenda items will need to be agendized at the next CAC meeting. So just want to clear up that process.
Yeah, well, you didn't clear it up. What did you just say?
That if you all have an actionable item, this is more like general discussion, like ideas that could be placed on your agenda for the next meeting that could eventually go to the board. Example number one is the AB 1139 discussion that now we've had for a few months now.
Okay, so I'm still confused. So the discussion we had with AB 139 today is going to go to the board of directors at their next meeting, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so my question was, do we have anything else to the board members, to the committee members that they would like to be carried to the board meeting? And you're telling me we can't do that?
We could definitely mention, and apologies for the confusion, but we could definitely mention like issues that are brought up during the discussion. But like, for example, if there's an actionable item that's brought up during this agenda item, it would need to be agendized properly for the next board meeting, for the next CAC meeting, just like the AB 1139 discussion that was done today.
Okay. Okay. So once again, does anybody on the committee have anything that fits within what Sebastian just said?
No.
Okay. Okay, well, with that, I believe we've went through our agenda. And I'd like to congratulate everybody, the committee, as well as the public, for being this engaged in these conversations, because it is real important for not just communities of concern, but everybody else in our service territory, that we get some of these things right and we have some of these conversations and make some of these movements. So thank you very much. And without any further ado, with the permission of Sebastian, I'd like to call this meeting to a close.
Announcements.
Oh, announcements. Committee member announcements. Are there any committee member announcements? Are you saying something, Tom?
Yeah, I had an opportunity to talk to Kimberly today, yesterday, I should say. That's Laura's assistant, correct? Anyway, she and I were lamenting the fact that when I speak to businesses in my community, I don't have anything to hand over. I really need something that is concise and clear for these folks. This business rollout is heading at us at the speed of light, and I've got a lot of confusion in my community about it. And I'm hoping that something along the lines of, I don't know if anybody has called our 800 number, but there is a recorded announcement on our 800 number that has helped me so much in delivering a very concise message to business owners, and something that I can carry forward to my neighbors as well in the residential realm, to kind of alleviate some of their fears and concerns about this, because there's so much ignorance. And so my announcement is in the form of a plea to get something like that out to us that we can hand over to potential business customers and help this rollout that's so imminent.
Can I mention something, Chair Price?
Sure.
So all of you should have received an email from me where I copied our accounts team to set up a series of meetings to discuss some outreach. I know, Tom, you had responded back, just a friendly reminder for Anna, so we could set that up and discuss the specifics, because there's some things coming down your way that will be talked about then. And my apologies, Nelson is part of the accounts team. So Nelson, sorry, I didn't mean to speak for you.
No worries at all. I just wanted to say that that is something that we are actively working on. We're actively working on a one-pager fact sheet that that's going to be public facing, and we are in the layout piece right now. So that should be coming to you very, very soon.
Great. It's needed.
Any other announcements? Okay, hearing none. I would really like to be able to adjourn the meeting if possible. If nobody has any objections, and make sure I haven't missed anything, I would now call this meeting to adjourn.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
A 3-hour meeting, new record, guys.
Yep, it was long. It was long, but it was worth it.
It was good.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Goodbye.